Okay, well, I guess it's our turn. Thank you so much, Natalie and Mary, for being our facilitators today. Jennifer and I are so excited that you are helping us, but also that all of you are here today. We had a great session yesterday in getting started, and I was so motivated by all the topics that were presented, but also by Dr. Thompson especially. As Natalie mentioned, we are in the hybrid learning session. And if you haven't done so already, if you would rename yourself, and to do so, hover over participants at the bottom of your Zoom screen, find your name, hover over your name, and simply rename yourself to the name, your title, and your organization or institution that you are here with today. For example, my name is Alicia Pennington. I am a faculty developer, and I work at WKU. So we'll give you a little bit of time to do that. While I do that, I will let Jennifer introduce herself. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, I am Jennifer Mills. I am the only district learning coach, district digital learning coach for Knox County. If you're not familiar with where we are in far southeastern Kentucky. I'm really excited to be here, honored to be part of this discussion. There's a lot that's happened this year, and this is a great forum to talk about how exciting the future can be for our students.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to talk about hybrid learning today. And I think that a lot of us learned a lot really quick about hybrid learning in the past 12 months. So again, our session leaders, Ms. Jennifer Mills, myself, Natalie Fagan, and Mary Jackson. The agenda for this session, we've done the introductions. Jennifer and I will do a topic overview of hybrid learning. We have some guiding questions that we have focused our short presentations on. Jennifer is going to take the K-12 aspect or perspective, and I will look at higher education. We're also going to ask you what your topics are related to hybrid learning. What are your concerns? What are your thoughts? What do you want to know more about as we get ready to plan for the next academic year? We're going to take those topics, and while Jennifer and I are presenting, Natalie and Mary are going to be answering your questions in the chat, but they're also going to be setting up the breakout rooms where you all are going to get together and solve or discuss some questions related to those topics. And then we're going to report out, as any good breakout group would do. We'll report out just before we end the session. So what brought you to this session? So I'm going to, in the chat, I'm going to put a link to our Mentimeter. And if you would answer the question, what brought you to this particular session? There were lots of wonderful sessions to choose from, but which one or what made you think to come here? You can click on that Mentimeter link and you should be able to just get to that on your computer and type in. There's nothing showing up on my screen. So is everybody able to get there? Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marisa. At first I was like, okay, everybody needs to type. Teach online, interested in carryover. Yes. Librarian, wanted to get some perspectives from educators and how libraries can help support hybrid. Oh, absolutely. There is so much. Freshman orientation. Yes. Hoping to see what others have experienced. That's been my experience as well. Faculty want to learn from each other. Administrators want to learn from faculty. What went well? What didn't go well? How can I improve it? Interested in learning how others are approaching the hybrid process. There are so many different ways to approach the hybrid process. Yes. On how to support faculty and students in that learning. It's different. It's just different. And there are some really great things that hybrid learning can bring to the table. So the session title, Description and Presenters, brought you here. Thank you. Always willing to learn more. Yes, and we've learned so much in these past 12 months. Helping students navigate higher education. Yes. Would like to learn some new strategies and techniques for helping students or to tutor students to learn to succeed in a virtual setting. We've all learned so many skills this past 12 months. I give it just a little bit longer for you to think about. Interested in instructional design, okay? Wanting to learn more, yeah. Thank you. Okay. So the next question, there we go. What are the key issues? What are key issues for you and your, oh, okay, there you go. I hadn't changed the slide, but you all were like already going for it. So that's great. Yeah. So what key issues, as you're looking at and thinking about the next academic year, or even the summer, and I am completely aware classes go on during the summer, but so as you're thinking about summer, as you're thinking about the next academic year, what are some key issues going forward? Because we've changed the wheel. We don't want to go back. Sure, there are some things we're going to be really excited to get back, like face-to-face teaching, but there are some things that we don't want to go back to. Engagement, yeah, that's a big one. It's always a big one. How do you get your students engaged? How do you get your faculty engaged? Virtual student, yeah. I love these word clouds, they're so much fun. Motivation, yes. How to get students motivated, how to keep faculty motivated. Flexibility, it's one of the great things about hybrid learning to me is the flexibility that it gives faculty and that it gives students. Not losing the tech gains. Oh, absolutely. We have learned, students and faculty alike, and administrators, staff, we've all learned so many tech skills in the past 12 months, and we don't want to lose those. Maybe we don't use them as much. It would be nice to have some face-to-face meetings and face-to-face conferences now and then. But we don't want to lose those tech skills. All right. Thank you all so much for participating in those polls. Really appreciate, because this session is about you. It's about you. It's about your needs. We want to make sure that you walk away with things in your toolkit, with strategies or thoughts that you can move your organization and your institution forward. Something we've learned when Jennifer and I were doing this, but I know someone has already mentioned it as well. Hybrid learning looks different and is different for lots of people. So in the chat, if you would, briefly, what is your definition of hybrid learning? And if it makes a difference, if you feel like you want to put K-12 or feel like you want to put higher ed or something next to it, go ahead. But what is how do you define hybrid learning? Okay, hybrid learning is responsive, yes. What else? How do you define hybrid learning? I like that answer, Sally. Yeah. Online learning or learning online and face-to-face. Using ed tech to create more flexible classrooms. Yes. Flexibility. Now everybody's, the chat's starting to catch up. Everybody's hitting enter at the same time. Flexibility, different options. Some in-person classes, some online classes. Stephanie, I like the way that you phrase that. It's multi-mode delivery. Absolutely. Virtual plus some real person interaction, multifaceted, Mary, yes. Multifaceted, multimodal. Enhances learning, offers flexibility to instructors and learners. Yes, Danielle. That kind of encapsulated a lot of it there. So as you can see, keep putting these in. These are wonderful. These are, everybody seems to define it just a little differently. And I know, and you'll hear later when I do my presentation, but also when Jennifer does hers, that sometimes a lot of it has to do with where you are. If you're in K through 12, it's kind of defined a little differently than it's defined in higher education. But there's some core values, some core pieces that stay the same. Audrey, yes, increases accessibility. Yes, and sometimes it increases equity too, depending on how you talk about equity or accessibility. It can definitely do that. So we all define hybrid differently. So Jennifer is going to start the big piece of the presentation with talking about K through 12. Jennifer?
Thank you. I pulled this slide together just briefly. I have noticed a huge difference in terminology between K-12 and post-secondary. You know, I'm still in graduate school myself, and asynchronous and synchronous, those are very common terms in the post-secondary world, but not really too much in the K-12 world. Prior to the pandemic, we were looking at blended learning as being the big key term, and hybrid or blended learning, where a portion of the traditional face-to-face is delivered using instruction. Distance and online learning was not a major part of K-12 education at all prior to the pandemic. And one of the challenges now that our teachers are facing is combining hybrid and blended learning with online and distance education at the exact same time, which is extremely challenging for the teachers. And that is referred to often as concurrent and simultaneous. So all these new words, every district is using something a little bit different. KDE has some terminology. Hybrid in K-12 right now is often referred to as some students in class on AB days, a virtual day, and other students on CD days. I mean, it has all different kinds of definitions. So if we, like we said earlier, we should kind of get all on the same page, and hybrid and blended for the purpose of this will be using technology to enhance instruction. And if you want to forward through to my, so our guiding questions for the whole entire session is hybrid learning here to stay? How can we support authentic student learning? How can we guarantee equity? And how can we better prepare students and faculty? Definitely hybrid learning is here to stay, and it has been around for a long time. All the way back into the 20th century, we started using modern technology with newsreels and radios. Distance learning is nothing new. Postal carriers were carrying correspondence courses, many probably on the Pony Express. And my husband even was in the military, and he did several long-term correspondence courses for career advancement. So this is nothing new. It's just really new for K-12. For post-secondary, not as much. And there's a lot of research about hybrid learning and distance learning, and it is exciting that now we are at a time where we can start to incorporate it and use it to make learning more individual for our students. So yes, we are excited that it is here to stay. I did put just a couple of, it's been around in the US Department of Education has tons of studies and implementation recommendations. And these are just a few, and I listed those just to give you an idea of where we've come from. You know, this is not something new, and it's definitely something that's continuing to change. An important thing to note is that in 1972, ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, was formed, and they have been through three different versions of standards. Their current standards are for students, educators, education leaders, coaches, and computational thinking competencies. And these apply to any educator or student, no matter what grade level. They do have it broken down by grade strands, but if you're not familiar with them, they're fantastic. The Kentucky Academic Technology Standards that will go into effect in April, well, they're in effect for next year. They'll be on the site this month, like within a few days. And they have a technology requirement for graduation now. So it's really exciting, and they are based off of the ISTE standards. So that is something exciting to look forward to in our implementation in Kentucky. And how can we support authentic learning for K-12? It's been challenging. I noticed that somebody wrote mental exhaustion on the Mentimeter, and wow, that is so true for our teachers. So how can we support authentic student learning? And for me, in my role as the district digital learning coach, it has been quite a journey for our teachers, but it's important to remind them that it's still instruction, and lesson planning is just as important, even though you might have to change the way you design it or change your delivery. You cannot forget the learning goal, the learning objective, activating prior knowledge, making sure your students understand that success criteria. What is success? How am I going to demonstrate learning? Providing rubrics. I think in hybrid learning, modeling is absolutely key for student success and engagement. And a big thing where we're used to often giving feedback in person, we have to be really creative in ways to give our students feedback. What are they doing? How are they doing with what the learning goal is? What are your next steps? What have you done well? How can I help you with this? So I think feedback is a critical component. And I think we have to give feedback in a lot of different ways and give our students a chance to have peer and self-assessment so that they feel more engaged in the whole process, because it's really important in that distance, hybrid, blended, for K-12, it's all together at this time. When we get back into the classroom, then we're more hybrid and blended. But right now, we're doing it all. So every component plays in, and just good classroom design is critical. And then the other thing that is really important, and this is on the next slide, is that technology integration should absolutely be purposeful and targeted. Often, and I remember years and years ago when you'd have to turn in your lesson plans for K-TIP, and you had to have that technology component, and you'd say, "Oh, I'm using a projector," and that's why. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what is this purpose? Technology for the purpose of what? How is this technology going to help impact my students' learning? Is it just technology for the sake of technology? Is it a really cool program? Is it going to enhance learning? So I think those are the questions we have to really start working with our faculty to develop. And our next question is, how do we guarantee equity? And if you'll go to the next slide, Alicia, something that I just really wanted to touch on is, and it's not often a conversation, but Peggy Ertmer in 1999 identified several orders of barriers, and we're just going to talk about the first two today. First order barriers, I think it's important to understand not just faculty barriers to technology integration, but students, families, all of these things. Lack of access First order barriers: external, lack of access, adequate infrastructure and working devices, time for teachers, planning instruction, professional development, technical education. All these things are external, and they're usually something that can be measured and something that can usually be fixed with money. And ironically, I think in the past, K-12 has had a much harder time with first order barriers. The pandemic has really put some funding behind technology, devices, and hardware in K-12. And I'm not sure about post-secondary, but I can tell you that we are a one-to-one district. We provide internet in our district for every student to have access. So these things, first order barriers are going away a little bit at this time. Second order barriers for us will be more intrinsic. What are your faculty attitudes? What are your family attitudes? Are your instructors willing to change the teaching methods that have to change to incorporate technology? But one of the most interesting things that I think about barriers to technology education, integration in education, is that you just don't solve first order barriers and say, oh, we're done. Sometimes you can be great with your first order barriers, working on your second, and then your technology changes, or your infrastructure needs to be updated, or there's a new program. So it can go back and forth, and it's something to always be looking at, working on simultaneously. And then other things that we can do in K-12 that we really encourage to address and guarantee equity, outside of looking at all those barriers, is look at student learning styles, considering generational characteristics. Our digital learners, our students are all natives. They have never not had a device in their hand. And on the other hand, you have folks like me who grew up with a phone attached to the wall. And 3 channels on TV. So the generational characteristics and the thought processes are important to be aware of when we're working on developing plans to make sure that we are equitable and addressing the emotional needs and the social needs, everything that they have based on where they are in their life. And K-12, there's a big spread between a preschooler and a 12th grader. So we have to consider that. And then just accommodating with universal UDL strategies and assistive technology, which is amazing and a wonderful thing that we can provide for our students. And then our last question that we are considering in K-12 for us, how do we prepare better for our students and faculty? And on the next slide, I just listed a few things that, I could probably list a million things under each one of these categories. But one of the big things for our students is to teach them to be good digital citizens. They need intentional focus on this, and probably our college students need this as well. My husband is a college professor, and I know what he says his students struggle with technology and password protection, social media presence, integrity, copyright, fair use laws, the danger of sexting. And if anyone, I know a lot of you probably have children, grandchildren, sexting is really a serious concern for our students all the way down to 3rd grade, which is the earliest example we have of it. We deal with it on a daily basis in our district, and I know around the state. We do have programs that monitor our managed devices, so that's a bit technical, but it's important for us to really work on developing these skills with our students, things that they don't necessarily know intuitively. And then for faculty, many of the same things. And a lot of this is all new. We spend years in college going through all of these courses and learning theory. And so I just think a lot of training, peer-to-peer collaboration and support that's what's getting us through in K-12 this year. And it's been a struggle, but the collaboration is the best part of all about technology.
Thank you, Jennifer. There are so many things that you said in your presentation that just so apply to higher education as well. There is a lot of collaborative learning, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about being a faculty developer is I get to be a part of watching that happen when we bring our faculty together for different events, such as we have a hybrid learning coffee hour meeting once a month, where some teachers that teach hybrid, they just come together and they talk what's working well, what's not working well, and they just learn from each other. And it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of and to listen to that. So there are some differences related to hybrid, and sometimes it's called blended learning, differences between K-12 and higher education. In higher education, most of the time with hybrid blended learning, we do look at replacing time in the classroom with time outside the classroom. And that's not meaning concurrently, some students sitting in front of you and some students sitting on Zoom, but it means instead of going to class 2 days a week or 3 days a week, you go to class 1 day a week. And the rest of the learning time is spent online interacting with things that are on there. Briefly defining blended and hybrid learning, it is a combination of online instruction and classroom instruction. A lot of you mentioned this when we asked earlier in the chat, how do you define hybrid learning? And it's the best of both worlds. It's the best of being face-to-face with your students and being able to see all of their face, hopefully this fall or spring, but being able to interact, being able to get that community with them, and having the flexibility to not always have to be on campus every single day. And this applies to students as well. We had a student panel talk to faculty, and one of the things that students said that we really like about how we're learning is the flexibility. And students like not having to find a parking spot every day. That's a very advantageous thing. I'm going to go through the same guiding questions that Jennifer did. And as she mentioned earlier, hybrid learning was here before COVID, so it's definitely here to stay after COVID. At Western, we kind of used the OLC, Online Learning Consortium's definition of hybrid learning. We have hybrid face-to-face or hybrid online. And that simply means if it's a hybrid face-to-face, half or more of the content is delivered face-to-face, activities, assessments, things of that nature. Or if it's hybrid online, then more than 50% of the content and interactions are conducted online. How do we guarantee equity? That depends on how you define equity. In one of yesterday's sessions, equity was being talked about, but it was not being necessarily talked about related to students with different abilities. Is the way you define or the way your institution defines equity more related to race and gender and sex than it relates to people having the ability to log online or have the fast internet speed that they need to? So one of the ways that we can try to guarantee equity, we found, we meaning some colleagues here at Western in the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, found last summer that Louisiana State University, they have it's a Google Doc. I will share the resources later, but I'm afraid if I share it now, you're going to get so excited about it that you're going to go there and kind of tune out here, but I promise to share this with you. It's a multiple page document where they have activities for you in the face-to-face classroom. As you can see, they have online synchronous, but I blocked that out because that's not our focus today. Online asynchronous, and also they have a column for limited or no access to internet or a device. So if you love to do think, pair, share activities, and oh my gosh, they're so wonderful. They're such a great activity for learning. Who wouldn't want to do them? They have different ways that you can do them, especially for that equity side of people that have limited or no internet access or have no access to a device, which has been a big thing in the past year. So this is one of the ways that we can do that. How do we better prepare faculty and students for hybrid learning? really, it's a lot of the things that Jennifer said in her presentation. Faculty development is one of those ways. Quality matters, and I know some of you have, and I don't know if all of you have heard of Quality Matters, but it is an international organization that has peer-reviewed, research-based quality standards for higher education and K through 12 online and hybrid courses. It is a very detailed course design focused rubric, and they offer a lot of training. You can get courses certified as quality online or quality hybrid courses. So I highly recommend qualitymatters.org and investigating some of those things, because in that you get the training for faculty. You also get, in a way, training for students, because it helps faculty look at their course from a student perspective. Sometimes a lot better than even I, as an instructional designer, can look at a course. But it helps with that course design that was mentioned in the chat earlier about reasons that you're here. You want to structure better. You want better quality in your course design. Quality Matters is one way that you can do that. It is a subscription-based system. You can join individually as just an organization, as maybe a district, if you're K through 12, or an organization such as Gear Up. Also, if you can join individually as a higher education institution. If you're a higher education institution, we at Western have a system-wide subscription. In other words, it means it's less expensive. There are 8 institutions across the state of Kentucky that are a part of this system, and it is a great way to share information and to learn more about quality course design. I am the coordinator for the entire system, so that's why I put my name again and my email address. So if you're interested in Quality Matters, you have more questions, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, happy to answer those. I've been involved with Quality Matters for several years on many different levels, so I'm happy to answer those. If you are a higher ed institution and you're wanting to maybe talk about becoming part of our system, I'm happy to talk with you about that as well. So please feel free to email me. And again, we're going to send you the slides so you will have the resources for that. Okay, Natalie. The next part of our session has to do with breakout rooms.
That's right. So I have been poring over the Menti and trying to work within the parameters of Zoom to set something up. So we see that engagement is a hot topic for you all. You really want to be able to discuss this in your breakout rooms. So per the suggestion of our wonderful facilitators, we are going to create rooms where K-12 educators can meet together in rooms where higher education educators can meet together. Although there is a lot of overlap between the two areas, as we just heard in the conversation between Alicia and Jennifer, we do know that there are some things that you want to be able to talk about in your own bubbles. So I am going to create rooms that are engagement for K-12, engagement for higher ed, and then help, inspiration, and motivation will be the topic of another conversation. Just kind of throwing in some of those other big ideas where you all said, we just need some more ideas. We need ways to, make those kinds of things happen. So again, broken those out, I'm going to open up those rooms and allow you all to choose where you would like to go. However, if you happen to not have an upgraded version of Zoom, I'll have to send you to the room of your choosing. And that's something that we can do as well.
Yeah. Okay, Natalie, before we send everybody off into breakout rooms, if you don't mind, I would like to share my screen again.
Of course.
In the chat, I have just posted a link to a Google form that we're going to ask you to fill out as you're in your room for a couple of reasons. One is you're going to report back out to this group at the end of this breakout session, the end of your breakout sessions. And then Natalie has to take that information and report back out to the much larger group at about, I think it's 2 o'clock Central Time or something about that. So again, I put this link in the chat so you can access it now. Fill it out. If you would, put the breakout group, the topic there, please. Please make sure that you, a note taker, someone that's going to fill out this form, that person's responsibility. So if you would do that, and then also select a person that's going to be the speaker for your group. This is how, when we all come back together in about 40, 45 minutes, Natalie's going to call on you and say, okay, Christina, if you would share out, what your group topic was and some of the answers to those questions. Okay, so if you would be sure to put a note taker's name and whomever is going to speak for the group. And then there's a list of questions for you all to talk about and consider as we move forward with this hybrid learning. Thanks, Natalie.
So those breakout rooms should be there. Please, I am still a Zoom novice. This is a new feature for us to be able to allow you all to choose your own breakout rooms. If you're not seeing this, if there's some problems, just shout out or send me a message in the chat and we'll make sure we get you where you want to be. And I will be
send me a message as well.
Okay, so we had 3 groups submit their forms, 3 of the breakout rooms. And I popped into the 2 higher education rooms a couple of times, and there was lots of good discussion going on at the time. So I just kind of slid in and slid back out because these are for you all, not for us. So let me go, since we have 2 higher ed rooms and 1 K through 12. Let's start with Sally Jackman and the K through 12 group, and your topic was help and inspiration. Can you kind of hit a couple of high points as to what your current situation is and what goals you all want to try to achieve for this next academic year?
Well, one thing that was interesting when we got in there, I'm at a community college in Hopkinsville Community College, but I do have had taught high school for 20 years. And Audrey Neal, who was in there with me, she's at Murray State, part of the TRIO program. So, but I do teach dual credit students. So we kind of felt like, okay, she works with TRIO and a kind of adult ed. And also we kind of had that. And then Jennifer joined us and we had a very good conversation. So it was kind of like, we're like, okay, we're really not current K to 12, but we've been there and done that. I mean, like I said, 20 years, I think, quite a bit of experience in that area. But we just covered a lot of area, but the main thing we felt like we needed was collaboration between the colleges and K to 12.
Okay.
We needed to know I have a lot of dual credit students. I teach college algebra and I have a lot of dual credit students. So it'd be nice to know, because a lot of times we'll hear instructors blame the high schools. If the high schools were doing correct, if they were teaching what they were supposed to be doing. And then I know when I taught high school, we'd say, well, if the middle schools were doing what they were supposed to be doing, we always blamed the one before. So we need that collaboration and that training, and let's work with each other and find out what are they doing and let them know what we're doing and support each other. And Jennifer had mentioned that digital learning coaches, that maybe we kind of work with that group so that we can have those digital learning coaches, because we've got a lot at the community college level that had they housed their syllabus on Blackboard, but they never had ever taught online. I was teaching an online class when we had to go, when the college shut down. So it was easier for me to make that transition between online and face-to-face, because I already was doing it. I already had documents I had created, but there were so many who had never done that. But we got together, those of us that had been doing it, we were in the middle of spring break. We had 3 or 4 days and they opened up the computer labs, and we went to, those of us that knew what to do, went in there and we helped the adjunct and the faculty who have never done it. Mm-hmm. And so we had that big we help each other, that big collaboration. And so I think that would be good. And plus we talked about how to, like, it was brought up, Jennifer brought up about Google Docs.
Mhm.
You know, most of those K to 12 are using Google. And at our school, and I'm sure other KCTCS, we use Word.
Yeah, Western.
And so students sometimes don't know how to take like a Google Doc and download it into a Blackboard course and kind of learn how to, you know, with that digital learning coach, you know, let's teach each other. Let us learn how to share with our students to get Google Docs and all. And so we just kind of felt like that was important to kind of have that collaboration between K-12, post-secondary,
Mhm.
and data as to what are the schools doing, what's going on at the different schools. Because it'd be nice to know how they're handling certain situations.
Mhm.
And
Abs-
Audrey, did I get it all that I needed to say?
Yeah, I think that was a good cover of what was going on, but really just talking about increasing that collaboration so that
Yeah.
conversations are P16 conversations, you know, moving both up and down the pipeline. And so that we're basically focusing on easing that transition and making that transition from high school to college as seamless as possible, you know, and there are so many different things that covers. So.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, that's wonderful. Okay. So that's something for all of us to work on, is that interconnection. Marissa or Marisa?
Marissa.
Marissa. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, I put in the chat, our group also talked about that need for collaboration. But some of the main, I guess, concerns that what was the first question? The current situation, we talked about everything from various institutions' fall plans. Are they continuing to offer more of these hybrid options, while some institutions are going back to the old normal of either in-person or asynchronous online, not the hybrid model, unless that's a contingency plan that we fall back on. We talked about this current mental health situation of our students being a challenge for engagement, course engagement overall, just being impacted by the learning needs of our students, the lack of technology and internet access, and just equity issues, courses that were taught traditionally on campus not actually adapting to online learning as well as we could hope. So we need some more training for faculty on that. So we talked about lots of issues and concerns, and then our hope, the goal that we are with a where are we going piece, is just adjusting to the new normal, and trying to realize that you know, I mentioned my college freshmen right now are hearing this messaging about returning to the old normal, yet they've never experienced it. They have no idea what to expect this upcoming fall because they haven't had the normal college experience yet. And so reminding our students to give themselves some grace, to allow themselves to readjust to this new normal.
Yeah.
But those were some of the main topics we talked about. And then we went into detail on the data we need and all of that. So I'm sure we'll get
That's
to
wonderful. Marissa, you mentioned about, you know, telling students to give themselves some grace and some adjustment time. I think that we also need to remind ourselves as faculty, or remind our faculty, that we also need to give ourselves grace in adjusting to whatever this is going to be, because it's not going away. It'll be better, but it's not going away. But to also remember to give our students additional grace, because they are getting used to, especially the freshmen, being in a classroom that they're all together. And some of us were talking, it's going to be different for us to be able to touch each other again. And how long is it going to take for us to adjust? So grace is still going to need to be extended for a long time. Thank you all so much. Very thoughtful comments and information. And Tony, what about your group?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is we went to the motivation and inspiration, and we were all waiting for the person to show up that was going to motivate and inspire us. And then we finally figured out that it was just us. So we moved on from there, and we came up with a great phrase, and I put it in the chat box. So I'm going to send it right now, I think, maybe to everyone here. It says, we need to acknowledge that there is change fatigue. People want routine without being told that flexibility is what they have to do. And I think one of the biggest things that we talked about is we're all tired and we're working all the time. And so, you know, we have fatigue, the students have fatigue. It's hard to get people to like seal the deal and finish what they need to do. So, but with that, talk about change fatigue and being flexible. We also, several of them have talked about how if they're head of a department, that they want to give their instructors the flexibility to teach in the style that they can, that's going to reach their students. So I do think that as we move forward, I said we're kind of in a revolution here because we've had the way we always did things and we've had this year, but moving forward, maybe now we can design them the way that we want to do it. And so some of that designing tips that they came up with was to make it personal to inspire students, because you can do PowerPoints and you can do videos, but the better ones include videos that have the professor in them, even if they're not a professional video. It's that having them engage personally with the student and sharing tidbits about what makes them tick, and so that the students can really connect. Also, they talked about having cohort groups because that way the students can help motivate each other. So that's a thing, however you can label it or work it, but if you're able to do that where they can have something like a cohort, then that would help out. And then one of the other folks said, engaging the students with the teachers, find the fun, because making it fun and having that different style of teaching more where the teachers and students are doing more together as opposed to just lecture and handing out the information, having them participate and having fun with it. And to remember that students, while they're young and we think they know everything digitally, they're on top of all of it, but there are students that aren't always as digitally savvy as we think they are. One of the last things that they talked about coming from a teaching perspective is get those grant offices to provide the correct devices for teachers to have what they need, or instructors, so that they can engage adequately and properly with the students. Because, you know, if you have equipment at the office and you have equipment at home and you don't want to lug it all back and forth, device preparation for our instructors, making sure that they can do the things that they need to and give them the training. Because sometimes it's like with that student that I had, I'm doing a one-on-one before our session today. He's got almost a 36 on his ACT, but he just needed somebody to show him where to click and what to do to accept his award letter. He was totally stuck on it.
Wow.
And he's getting thousands of dollars in scholarships. So motivation and inspiration, I hope that a lot of us will keep the good, and it's been a struggle to learn, but that we'll keep that knowledge, keep that technology working with us, and be flexible, but remember that there's a change and all that flexibility and fatigue with it. So anything else y'all want to contribute that I might have left off in our group? It was a fun session. Thank you.
It sounds like it. Amazing things have come out of your sessions. I am more than happy to share the results of your work in those sessions. If you want to, you can message me in the chat. Actually, the better way to do so, I'll have your email. I can't type and talk at the same time. So I put my email address in the chat. If you want to email me and say, hey, do you mind sending me the results of L, everybody's chat, everybody's breakout rooms. I'm happy to do that. I also put a link to our slides in the chat so that you can look at that, because we have our resources listed there. And we're almost out of time before we go back, and Natalie has to report back to everybody. So Jennifer and Mary and Natalie, closing thoughts.
If you don't mind, I do want to give one encouraging thing. About 3 months ago, which we have statewide and regional digital learning coach meetings. We went from 100 last year to over 500 this year, working one-on-one with teachers to help them with technology integration. And a big concern of ours is something I've heard today. 3 months ago, we were concerned about losing the technology gains when we try to go back to the normal or the way it was. And what we have been seeing month to month in these meetings and reporting back is that we are not losing that technology gain. We are back in the classroom in a lot of districts full time, and we are seeing full on technology integration with hybrid learning, and it is fabulous. It is fantastic. So I just wanted to offer that encouragement, because we're moving down that road and seeing great things in the classroom.
That's great. Mary or Natalie?
I am feverishly typing or writing out my notes to share. I am so sorry to you all that I probably will not do justice. And I'm sure all of the different sessions feel that way too. We're passionate about this topic, or we wouldn't have shown up today. I will do my best to share. You can, of course, send me a chat or an email if you think of something real quick you want to make sure I mention.
I was just really excited to hear a lot of the comments. And from the discussion, it seems like we just have a lot of people here that care, and that's half the battle. So I really appreciate that. I love everything that I heard. And as someone who is has a learning style that's quite different and it's just not very easy sometimes for people like me who are auditory learners to learn asynchronously. I loved how Tony talked about, having multiple forms of engagement. Excuse me. So I just really appreciate everyone's comments, and thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
And yes, I was asked, do we have the link for where we go back? We're going to go right back to the same landing page that you had started at to get here, but I am going to find the Zoom for our 3 o'clock and drop it in the chat. Perfect.
So what we're going to do now, I'm going to post a new Zoom link in the chat. So what's going to happen is we're going to end this Zoom session, and we will all join back like yesterday in one large group. And we're our moderator, so Natalie, for our session, will share out some things that she learned from our session, and we'll learn some things from the mental health session and from the other sessions as well. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you in the big room.